We are on a vertical part of the growth curve for money. And the globalist bankers knew that they were going to have to create untold trillions back last fall, but they couldn't announce to the world or to the American public specifically that they were going to print, 8 or 10 trillion dollars in the first half of 2020 because humanity wouldn't have put up with it. So they needed an excuse to create the money that had to be created anyway, or the system would collapse. So the virus was dropped on humanity by globalist interests, and this way humanity welcomes the creation of any amount of money.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers. This returning guest almost needs no introduction. Rob Kirby, the founder of Kirby Analytics, is here with us to talk about what's really going on in this upside down and unprecedented time we find ourselves in, both economically, globally, and in real threats to our lives and our livelihood and our futures. Rob, thank you for joining us here on Liberty and Finance.
It's my pleasure to be with you again, Dunnigan. So this was a MarketWatch article. CME Group secures $7 billion credit facility to protect against a clearing member default. That was yesterday afternoon. So you see, what I was talking about Wile E. Coyote moment, it's really looking like that's exactly what's going on, because the fabric of the precious metals edifice is starting to rip and tear. Moncada's leaving the industry. I mean, Moncada is the oldest precious metals dealer in the world, and they're exiting the business. Scotia tried to sell Moncada 2 years ago, and they couldn't find a buyer. And now they're just shuttering the business. So what is it that Scotia, I mean, is it really that there's no money in gold? I mean, the gold market has a market capitalization of $8 trillion. Is there no money in it? Well, there's $8 trillion at least in it. But why is it that a respectable name in banking suddenly wants nothing to do with the precious metals trade? I mean, not unlike Rothschilds a number of years ago, who exited the business saying there's no money in it. Well, Dunnigan, I don't understand how an industry with record volumes trading, an $8 trillion market cap, how there's no money in it. So, I mean, what's the real story? I mean, the real story is that the whole industry is a fraud, and the bank wants to lessen their exposure to basically being sued into oblivion, plain and simply. And I mean, you can dress it up. You can put a beard on a donkey, and it looks like a donkey with a beard. But I mean, the gold and silver markets, the precious metals markets are a fraud. They're a crime scene. And if you're going to try to hold yourself out as a respectable deposit-taking institution and a manager of people's wealth, which is what Scotia tries to do in the real world, you don't really want this burden of being engaged in an industry that is absolutely and utterly fraudulent. I mean, Scotia bought Moncada back in 1997, and Scotia, up until 1997 was Canada's only, and they aren't Canada's only bullion bank now, because Toronto Dominion has entered that arena as well. But I would have it that when Scotia bought Moncada, they had no idea what they were buying. They had no idea the extent to which the precious metals markets were absolutely and utterly rigged. And the rigging has only become much more pronounced and worse since 1997. And the kind of notoriety that being involved in the precious metals markets brings to an institution is the kind of negative publicity a bank that sells warm and fuzzy stories to the public wants no part of. So out they go. And I mean, they've obviously made a marvelous return on their investment, because assuming they paid something for Moncada in 1997, yesterday we learned that they're shuttering the business. Just shuttering. I guess it was last week. It wasn't yesterday. It was the CME news that we learned about yesterday. And, you know, and we're told by the naysayers, of course, that all's well at the CME, and they can't be and never are involved in any shenanigans in the commodities markets. But I guess that's why the CME had to secure a $7 billion credit facility to protect against one of their members defaulting. So, funny times. Wile E. Coyote, as Wile E. Coyote would say, funny high stakes and high heights drama in the financial world. Anyway, this is going to increase. And the other thing I find very interesting, Dunnigan, is the way this whole the way our existence is being described to us by the mainstream. I've noticed a lot of rhetoric heating up about Trump blaming China for the COVID virus and saying he's going to charge China a big amount of money in compensation. I mean, the Chinese, of course, are saying that it's the American military establishment that created the virus. But what I see going on here, Dunnigan, it's the left-right Hegelian dialectic rearing its head. And you see, my view of the virus, in my view, is man-made, and it was dropped on humanity because our financial system is experiencing the effects of having compound growth in money, which means exponential growth in the money supply going forward. And these central bankers, or these globalists who control the money, the globalists control America and the globalists control China. The real enemy and the real discussion shouldn't be about the left-right paradigm. The real discussion should be about what globalism is perpetrating on humanity. It's globalism that brought us and reinforces to us the requirement of using the Keynesian fiat money system that we currently have. That system is seriously broken because embedded in it is the notion of money has to grow at a compounding rate. We have a fiat money system with compound interest, and we are on a vertical part of the growth curve for money. And the globalist bankers knew that they were going to have to create untold trillions back last fall, but they couldn't announce to the world or to the American public specifically that they were going to print, $8 or $10 trillion in the first half of 2020, because humanity wouldn't have put up with it. So they needed an excuse to create the money that had to be created anyway, or the system would collapse. So the virus was dropped on humanity by globalist interests, and this way humanity welcomes the creation of any amount of money, so long as the fridge remains full and the Netflix subscription gets renewed every month. Because that's really the predicament humanity finds itself in right now. And this way, the perpetrators of the whole bloody affair can sit back with a martini in their hand, and they can say, this is all an act of God. Well, this is not an act of God, as we've talked about before. This is an act of man. This is an act of a very perverted, disgusting human being named John Maynard Keynes, and what he perpetrated on mankind many years ago. Fiat money is failing. And in doing so, fiat money is doing exactly what it was designed to do. You cannot have a money system or a money regime with compound interest and have it maintain itself in the long run. And you see, John Maynard Keynes never cared about that, because it was pointed out to him by intellectuals at the time that the system that he was advocating was guaranteed to fail and bring about serious hardship for humanity. And his arrogance and his narcissism led him to just reply to the people that pointed out the shortfall of his system, that he didn't care, because in the long run, we're all dead anyway. Well, here we are, Dunnigan. We are now in the long run. Welcome to the long run. Fiat money is failing. The amount of money that the Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury have printed or committed to print in the last 60 days is an entree to a main course that'll come in future months, where a blindingly larger amount of money will be required, because we are on a vertical growth curve for money. So if your eyes are watering at the number of trillions that have been committed in the last 60 days, which by my measure is somewhere between 6 and 10 trillion, I mean, we are facing a very, very real possibility that with the amount of money that's been committed to be printed right now, the Fed's balance sheet could be 11 trillion by the end of the year. It won't stop there, Dunnigan, because the very fact that fiat money is failing, and the fact that we're on this exponential growth curve due to compounding, means that next year's Fed balance sheet very likely doubles again, and maybe we're at a $20 or $25 trillion balance sheet for the central bank. But I mean, at some point, Dunnigan, this becomes a lot worse than Wile E. Coyote taking a wide turn on a narrow, short pin canyon cliff road. At some point, we go into free fall, or let's just say this: the currency goes into free fall, and living standards accompany it on the way down, because living standards will have to diminish, and the currency will ultimately achieve its true intrinsic value, which is zero, and that implies an unavoidable hyperinflation coming our way at some point, and sadly, we should all live to see it. And I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but this is baked into the cake now, and this is where we are headed, like it or not.
You keep pointing out is that many who have been, like yourself, and most of our viewers who have been concerned that this is the shape of reality for some time, have been getting poo-pooed, and now it seems like even from officialdom, even from those in the belly of the beast, there's just, like you mentioned last time, oh, I guess we're going to have to bring out the ESF. Okay.
Dunnigan, the only reason we're not there already is because they stole $21 trillion and they hid it, and they've been using that. My best guess is they've already blown through that. Okay, and now they need to go back to the trough and get more. Except now they've got more eyes on them than they've ever had, and stealing the trillions that they used to steal while nobody knew where to look. It was relatively easy to steal in the past, but now they've got so many eyes on them from so many different directions. Stealing the required money, they actually have to invent believable reasons to steal the money now, which is why they have to introduce things like coronavirus and scare the living bejeepers out of people so that they're tolerant of the creation of blinding amounts of money. You see, people should be just as upset about the missing 21 trillion as well, actually, they don't. People aren't upset about the creation of the 6 to 10 trillion that's been announced. Whatever, you see, the numbers are so obscene and so big, Dunnigan, I can't even keep track. Because I mean, Pelosi throws around $1 trillion packages like it's lunch money. And I mean, it's like they're bargaining chips. Well, we might agree with this if you give us an extra $1.5 trillion for this new program. And it's almost like it's a new $1 trillion plus package every day. And I mean, how long does this go on before people around the world completely lose confidence in the U.S. currency as a means to settle their international accounts? Like, if I'm producing raw materials anywhere in the world and shipping them to America, and America's paying me in U.S. dollars, and I'm reading that America's just creating, now it's getting up into tens of trillions of extra dollars. Do I really want to take dollars in return for what I had to work to extract from the Earth's crust? Or do I instead ask for something that is more tangible, like gold in settlement, or something else of substance, something that has intrinsic value, something you can put your hands on, and something that can't be created with keystrokes from a computer?
Like U.S.
But I mean,
real
this
estate,
is
yeah.
It's getting obscene. It's getting obscene and ridiculous. But I mean, I found it also very interesting that there was an announcement of Chinese buying some shale oil interests in America. And of course, shale oil interests in America right now are not economic with the current price of crude oil and the current demand destruction we've seen in crude oil, with the global economy being in lockdown due to this virus. And think what you want of the virus, but the fact of the matter is, because of the virus, global demand for crude oil, because airlines are stagnant, cruise lines for the most part stagnant, nobody's going to work, so cars aren't moving, and trucks aren't moving to the degree they normally would, and trains aren't moving. So the demand for crude oil has evaporated. The price has collapsed as a result of that. And these more expensive means of extraction, call it shale oil, have become basically boons for the American economy in particular, because all of that shale oil was financed with borrowed money, and the bonds that were issued to finance the expansion of the shale oil fields are basically now all trading at pennies on the dollar, because the ability of these companies to pay or service the debt that they incurred to create the shale oil production, these bonds are going to fail. But now we see the Chinese in looking to buy some of these assets at bargain basement prices or throwaway prices, and China will be securing their long-term energy future by purchasing these assets at, let's just say, bargain basement prices. And I mean, to the Chinese, all they view it as they're cashing in the U.S. government securities that they currently hold, which basically are going to go to zero. And instead, they're trading something that is guaranteed to go to zero, because America will never make good on the debt. And they're trading them for tangible assets that will secure their long-term energy needs. And that's tangible and something you can wrap your head around, or should be able to wrap your head around. Here in the West, though, Dunnigan, we think that the bonds are the safety trade, and the shale oil is the side of the trade with no value. And the Chinese, of course, see it completely the opposite. They see the bonds as being the worthless side of the trade, and the energy security for the future as being the value side of the trade. And that will end up being the right side of the trade to be on, as long as you have a proper time perspective. And of course, the West will, when this turns out to be the case, the West will then complain and say how the Chinese cheated them.
Yeah,
cheated them out of their, valuable resource. Well, the reality is the Chinese aren't cheating anyone out of anything. The Chinese just happen to know value, and why we in the Western world are doing business with a totalitarian communist regime who buys things in the name of the state is ridiculous anyway. I mean, you can take the Hegelian dialectic and you can stick it where the sun doesn't shine, so far as I'm concerned. I mean, we should not be mixed up. We should never have shipped our jobs to China to begin with, but we did. And, we should never have spent ourselves into oblivion, but we did. And we should never, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, Dunnigan, we should never have dropped the gold standard, but we did. And of course, the foolish Keynesians like to say, and have said many times throughout history, that the gold standard didn't make sense because there wasn't enough gold. Well, I don't see it that way at all, because gold is basically infinitely divisible, and price, the notion that we didn't have enough gold was not the issue. The issue was that we had the wrong price assigned to gold. We didn't have enough gold at $35 an ounce, correct. If the price of gold had been allowed to go to where it needed to go in a free market, we had ample amounts and supply of gold. What we had too much of was currency, and what we had too much of was growth. Uncontrolled growth, where I come from, Dunnigan, it's referred to as cancer. And cancer is not a good thing. And what gold does is it brings discipline to a financial system, and it acts as a governor on growth. just like in a lot of, like, if you're familiar with trucks that drive on the highways, or buses that move your kids around, on school trips, a lot of those vehicles that travel the highways and the byways, they have what are called governors on them, which allows them to only go up to a certain speed. And I think trucks are limited to about 70 miles an hour, I believe, somewhere in that area, because it's deemed by humanity that it isn't safe to have transport trucks with heavy payloads going down the highway at 100 miles an hour. So the governor at 70 miles an hour seems to be, a good compromise in allowing the truck to use the highway, but not allowing the truck to race around at 100 miles an hour with a potentially unsafe load. Same thing. I don't think most parents would be very happy to see a busload of kids, some of which may be their own, traveling on the highway at 100 miles an hour either. So they have a governor on them to keep them from exceeding the speed limit by a ridiculous amount. So having governors on growth, it's called discipline, and it's called discipline for safety reasons. And having a governor on the growth rate of money is also not such a bad thing, because it seems to me every time we have growth rates reported in our economy, much over 2 or 3%, we have central bankers telling us that the growth rate is going to cause inflation anyway. And I mean, so what they're really telling us is that if we have growth, they print infinite amounts of money, and then when they get the accompanying growth that infinite amounts of money creation brings, they then say they have to rein in or raise interest rates to rein in activity, lest inflation get out of control. And this is the very thing that a gold standard does quite naturally. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. We have this edifice called central banking that imposes arbitrary restrictions on, basically they pick winners and losers in our economy. And they do this all under the guise of it being good for us. It's sort of like saying we're going to control the weather because God didn't make weather right. I mean, the weather allows us to grow the food we need, to raise crops and to harvest crops, and we know when one season ends and when the next season begins, so that we can get ready to plant again. The imposition of central banking on money basically has blurred the seasons. We don't know when it's spring. We don't know when it's fall. Everything's just a grow. And you see, and that leads to unmitigated and uncontrolled growth. And I double back to what I said earlier about unmitigated or uncontrolled growth. That's called cancer. And cancer is not a healthy thing. And what central banks really are in our world, they're the purveyors of monetary cancer. And the world is full of monetary cancer right now. And we need a break from the current system, lest the cancer kills us all. But that's where we're headed, and unfortunately, the story won't have a happy ending because cancer kills. You see, Dunnigan, I'm trying to figure out how we're going to survive the sure-to-come radiation treatment. The world is suffering from monetary cancer right now, and we are going to have some shock radiation treatment. And how we are going to survive this, and some people will, but some people won't. but what's coming is going to be painful. And that's the predicament we're in. And if you've known anybody or been close to anybody that has suffered through cancer, you know what a painful experience it is and can be for those associated with it. It's not a fun show, but that's where we are. And you know what? We have leadership that refuses to deliver the message and be honest about where we are. Instead, they want to, they want to mischaracterize the whole situation we have find ourselves as a species in. They want to describe it as a left-right Hegelian dialectic. In my view, anyway, Dunnigan, there's absolutely no doubt that this virus was created in a lab. And I mean, to me, it's a fool's errand and a fool's argument to discuss who created it, because it was created by globalists. And it's not about left or right. The globalists created it because the globalists knew they had a dying money system. The globalists knew they had to create untold amounts and untold trillions of money. And they knew they had to inject it into the system. And they knew that humanity, a rationally thinking humanity, wouldn't tolerate it. So they had to inject fear and worry and confusion and confuse people into believing that it's a left-right garbage thing, and then to tell the uber lie that this is an act of God. No, the act of God was putting perfect money in the earth's crust for us to extract. The act of God was the creation of gold and silver, which is perfect money. The act of man was to introduce Keynesian economics to mankind, an artificial construct, which is failing, just as it's designed to do. And this is the biggest crime ever perpetrated on humanity. And now humanity's going to have to live with the consequences of that crime. But it's no act of God. It's an act of very corrupt, very evil human beings. Full stop. And I'm the messenger. So, shoot me if you want, because this is reality. So we can get hip with it, or we can fight it. We can fight it right to the operating table, but I'm, or to the radiation treatment. But, we're going to get radiated one way or another, because this system isn't going to stand.
Yeah, there's a question from viewer TC19. It says, why is the Federal Reserve being allowed to create currency and purchase all of the real assets while the rest of humanity just watches all the wealth stolen by the few? Is it because people are not educated enough to understand what is happening and not to rise up?
I'm going to answer the question by saying most of humanity does not understand the concept of compound interest and exponential growth. And people cannot understand that we are in a box where the amount of money in existence has to grow at an exponential rate from here on out, or the system collapses. And as the money keeps being created by the controllers, who are the central bankers, they will continue to purchase and own a larger share of the productive economy until there's nothing left to take. And that's the curve we're on right now. And that's going to heighten and become more pronounced. And the concentration of ownership in the hands of the people who create the money is only going to grow. And the amount of money being created is also only going to grow and it's going to grow very noticeably going forward because it already is noticeable.
Yeah, even to common people who pay attention to what's going on around them, it's undeniable that this forced lockdown of economies and this, at the same time, this almost unlimited, well, they're even using the term unlimited increase in the currency supply are driving. First of all, people are losing their jobs. Second of all, people are losing their small businesses. Third of all, if you think about like VRBO and Airbnb owners who had been trying to become small mini-me's of the hospitality industry, that kind of thing, they're all being driven out of business. And all of these assets, you're mentioning the shale industry and so on, all these assets changing hands in more and more concentrated farmers, et cetera, are going to be driven out of business, are actually as we speak. So people just need to look around them just for a moment to see it's already in rampant transition, what you're describing.
Yeah. And you see, the other thing too, Dunnigan, it seems irrelevant how much debt issuers put into the market. There's never a shortage of buyers. I mean, central banks are the buyers of last resort. There's never a question of whether can we issue this many new bonds. I mean, the U.S. government deficit this year is projected to be something in the magnitude of $5 trillion. I mean, Dunnigan, this is blinding amounts of money. This is scary amounts of money, and the notion that there's never a question about can we shoulder this much additional debt? The question's not even asked. It's just pedal to the metal and print we do. And I mean, my question, I think I might have raised this question with you the last time we spoke, but when do people lose confidence in the dollar? Will it be when the Fed's balance sheet hits 10 trillion? I mean, at the beginning of this year, the Fed's balance sheet was 3.8 trillion.
Under 4. Yeah.
So will people lose faith in the currency when the Fed's balance sheet hits 10 trillion? Or will it take 15, 20, 25, or 30 trillion? Because this is the growth that we will witness in the very near future if this is allowed to continue on its current trajectory. And I mean, this is baked into the cake now. And why people don't understand that that's what we're confronting is because people have trouble grasping the notion that we are on and experiencing vertical growth in money. And if the money supply stops growing vertically, the whole system collapses. And if the whole system collapses, we're probably going to war. Sad to say, but that's probably where we're headed. But my feeling is we're going to print, and we'll continue to print. And at some point, the dollar will lose its footing, and the dollar won't just slip. The dollar will go down like a ton of bricks. And this will occur also. And it's, Dunnigan, sadly, this is mathematics. And it's really not the rantings of somebody who's angry. It's actually somebody who's resigned themselves to math. I've resigned myself to the math, and this is a surety, and this is where we're going. And pity those who don't understand the concept of compound and exponential growth. And for those of you who don't get it, what compound and exponential growth really mean, Google Chris Martenson and Crash Course and watch the video series on the Crash Course at Martenson's site, peakprosperity.com, and you will get a great visual presentation on how compound growth works, and maybe then you will start to realize that this is the trajectory we are currently on, and getting off this trajectory is going to be an extremely painful exercise if we're able to do it at all.
Yeah, we've got a number of questions from viewers on, I mean, you've painted the very bleak picture of the macro situation that we find ourselves in on this basically a rocket launch of a ski slope on our currency supply and how destructive that's going to be. People are looking to, what is this year, what is next year likely to look like? What are the kind of the phases as you go through this destructive, uncontrolled, and unhealthy portion of the Keynesian growth cycle? What do you see as phases people can watch for? We've certainly seen the signposts are just flying past us now on an almost daily basis.
Yeah. Well, listen, the way that Chris Martenson likes to explain compound growth is that, the damage, unfortunately, when you have exponential growth, the damage all happens at the end. Okay. And the way he explains this, so people can maybe get a picture in their head. If you take a drop of water and you double the drop of water, if you take the drop of water and you put it in Yankee Stadium, and every second if you double the amount of water, how long does it take before Yankee Stadium is full? And the answer to the question is it takes about 50 minutes. But 45 minutes into the exercise, the water's only up to your ankles if you're standing on the field. And in the last 5 minutes, the whole stadium fills. You see, and that's the way compound growth works. The damage isn't all at the front end. The damage is all at the back end. Well, we're at the back end now with money. And money growth is growing at a ridiculous pace and has to continue growing at a ridiculous pace or the game ends. You see, so we are standing probably in the monetary equivalent of we're standing in Yankee Stadium. The water's at our ankles. The water's going to be over our head very soon because the money's going to continue to be printed and it's going to overwhelm us very quickly. We don't have years left anymore. We're lucky if we have weeks or months. The amount of money being created is going to spiral and it's going to expand geometrically. You see, and the people in control of the money, their biggest problem is they're trying to figure out where to get rid of the money so we don't feel the effects of inflation. Because they're trying to off the money as quickly as they're creating it. This is why America is so engaged in military adventurism. Because it gets rid of the money from the domestic creation. The pot of creation is America. You see, and this is why America's been engaged in making pockmarks in the sand in the Middle East for the last 10 or 15 years. Because they've spent $7 trillion at least doing this. But you see, if the $7 trillion hadn't been spent making pockmarks in the sand, the $7 trillion would have entered the domestic U.S. economy. And we would already be experiencing hyperinflation in the domestic economy. So, going forward, expect more adventurism, expect more wars as they try to throw the money overboard and to basically neutralize its effects on the domestic economy at home. But the amount of money they have to create is so tremendous. I mean, I really don't know how they're going to be able to off the amount of money that's going to be required. I mean, this is why there will be discussions in the very near term about things like universal basic income. Because the money's going to be created. People need to get this into their head. The money's going to be created whether they can find a place to put it or not. and they will find places to put it, and more crazy ideas as to how to spend money and where to put money that we don't have and haven't earned will enter the lexicon in the very near future going forward, because we're on this treadmill where the money has to be created and people don't get it. But people are going to learn and will understand before this is all over, a good many of us will, the deleterious effects of compound growth and exponential growth in money. Because this is the ramp we're on. And it's not, calling it a ramp is not really, it's a launch pad. It's not a ramp.
Yeah, my concern is that people will not understand the connection that you're making there. They'll understand that times are hard, times are bad, but they'll be told a different reason. They'll be told the wrong reason. We won't learn a lesson.
We're going to be told it's the Chinese that caused it. We're going to be told that it's an act of God that caused it. We're going to be told that it's a virus that caused it. We're going to be, listen, wait till aliens enter the lexicon, Dunnigan. Wait till we're told it's because there's an alien invasion. There will be more reasons given for the money creation that's going to come in the very near future than you can shake a stick at.
Okay, so in the face of that insanity, that coming destruction, people who have any ounce of common sense and fiber and upbringing left in them want to get out of the way of that oncoming rocket, want to step to the side. To some extent, that's going to be impossible, because if our whole world, if our whole global economy, if there's huge conflict coming and that sort of thing and destruction of value all around us, it's not going to be possible to get out of that unscathed. But what you've talked about in the past is some of the things that people need to do. You talk about, number one here is awareness. Okay, beyond awareness.
Yeah, beyond awareness, to immunize yourself from the deleterious effects of this rampant money growth going forward. You've got to get real. You need real stuff. And real stuff is stuff that will revalue as the nominal value of the monetary unit races to zero. You want to own or possess things that will revalue when the nominal value of the currency unit goes to zero. And things that historically revalue or reset their values are precious metals, the monetary metals. Crypto may help you out in this regard somewhat, because they have limits to how much of them can be created. And real stuff like food, agricultural land, medical supplies, and very, very possibly and very likely a means to protect it all if you happen to possess it. These are things that will be in the ultimate demand in the years to come, or in the weeks, months, and years to come. It used to be done again. We used to talk in terms of years. We don't have years anymore. Now it's weeks or months. And, I try to keep my my discussions realistic in terms of, it's amazing that we haven't had a complete breakdown in our financial system already. And the reason we haven't had a complete breakdown is because the kind of antics, Dunnigan, that have been used to keep this thing appearing somewhat normal, the things that have been done to keep this ship afloat to the extent that it is today have been things like stealing or creating 21 trillion off-book dollars, hiding them in a place like the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the secretive adjunct to the U.S. Treasury that operates with no oversight and doesn't produce financials and amounts to a secret slush fund. And without it, we would have been where I'm saying we're headed. We would have been there years ago if it hadn't been for the creation of that money. But now we're going there at breakneck speed because they literally can't create enough fake off-book money to satisfy the requirement going forward. Because we need geometrically more money with each passing unit of time. And that's the curve we're on. And we can't get off it. What we need to have is a debt jubilee. We need to have debt repudiated, and we need to start over. And unfortunately, that doesn't occur in history without war. War is what accompanies this historically. But maybe our species can grow up to the point where we can admit that this is where we really are and that things need to change. But then again, that would require the people that have run the world into the ground to step back and admit that what they've done is wrong. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
We don't even see anybody admitting that shutting down the entire global economy for a quarter, and now it's being told it's going to be for some extended, unknown additional period of time, was wrong. So, we haven't seen any acknowledgement that abusing our currencies, etc.
But Dunnigan, the reason you haven't seen an acknowledgement is because having the economy shut down for an undefined period of time will be the reason put forward why we're going to have that much more money printed.
Yep, right.
See, it's the justification. Yep. It's the reason and the justification all at the same time.
Yep. But
let's just say one thing. We will not forever sit at home with a full fridge and a Netflix subscription that never expires or ever matures. That won't happen. Okay. And, people need to wrap their heads around that too.
We are glad for your presence here with us, Rob. We didn't get to most of our viewers' questions. However, as I've been looking at them, you answered more than half of them. So just grateful for you sharing your deep perspectives with us on this, and for joining us here on Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers. Well, it's been my pleasure. And, like I say, I am the messenger. Shoot me if you will. We don't want to. We want you to come back soon. So we're going to, and it looks like with the accelerating rate of change here around us, we might have to have you back at an accelerating pace so we can keep tabs on what things are going on, and people can keep your perspective in front of them, because they're certainly hearing a different thing from officialdom, and we want you here with us. So thank you. Yeah. Well, the signposts are going by at an increasing speed. They are indeed. If you've decided that now is the right time for you to protect your family's financial future by acquiring physical precious metals, gold and silver, I'm delighted to let you know that I have now become a licensed dealer's representative for Miles Franklin, one of the oldest and most trusted names in bullion dealerships. And we can provide you with physical delivery to your personal possession or to professional vault storage or precious metals IRAs. Just email me at libertyandfinance@protonmail.com, and please include your name and phone number in your email to libertyandfinance@protonmail.com. We'll get right back with you and find out how to best meet your needs so that you can either begin or increase your acquisition of physical precious metals now and protect your family's future starting today.